order the Thursday, December 10th, 2020 meeting of the Clive City Council. Will the clerk please call the order?
Mayor Cirksena.
Here.
Council members, Eric Klein.
Here.
John Edwards.
Here.
Michael McCoy. Susan Judkins.
Here.
Ted Weaver. I see you indicating that you are here, Ted. Thank you.
Okay, and I think Michael may be joining us a little late this evening. So good evening, everyone. Nice to have everybody here for our only meeting in the month of December of the Clive City Council. So thank you. We have a full agenda this evening, and we'll look forward to conducting the city's business tonight. I believe we have members of Girl Scout Troop 824 with us, Pete, to recite the Pledge of Allegiance for us.
That's correct, Mayor. Leslie, you should be able to unmute yourself and start your video as well.
Okay, we are unmuted and our video is on. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Great. Girls, go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you, ladies. I must say that was done quite well. Thank you very much. You can come back anytime and recite the Pledge of Allegiance for us. How about that? Hope you have happy holidays. Yeah. Everybody wave. Okay, very good. Thank you again. Well, after that nice treat, we're going to move to approve the agenda. I'm not aware of any changes.
Move approval.
It's moved by John, seconded by Eric. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The agenda is approved. Okay, now's the time where anybody that's joining us in the meeting that needs to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda, this is the time to do so. If there's anybody here to do that, please make yourself known to Pete, and he can get you connected so we can have our dialogue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Folks, if you'd like to get my attention, the best way to do that is with the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. In the black bar with the icons, you'll see a participants icon. Click on that. It will open up a separate window, and at the bottom of that window, you should be able to raise your hand by clicking the raise hand icon. For those participating by phone, *6 will unmute yourself, and *9 will raise your hand, and I'll be able to see that as well. At this time, I do not see any hands going up.
Okay, Pete, thank you. Seeing none, we'll move to consent items.
Move the resolution. Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Eric. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those, would the council please vote? And that passes 4 in favor. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move to several presentations we have this evening for life-saving awards for the Clyde Fire Department and the Clyde Police Department. And Chief Rowe, I think you're going to lead us with these, please.
That is my pleasure, Mayor. We've got 3 different awards. The first one I'd like to introduce is from May 17th, and this incident happened in the 8000 block of Cobblestone Road in Urbandale. Those receiving the award on this particular incident are all from the fire department: Colby Martin, Ryan Osborne, Ashley Foster, Greg Glendy, Joel Oddie, Jason Glaza, and Patton Norton. And in this incident, there was an adult male that was found unresponsive. He had intermittent periods where he'd wake up and then he would pass out. The crews quickly determined that his heart rate was dropping dangerously low, and they used a pacing feature on our cardiac monitors to keep his heart rate in a normal range to keep him perfusing. This is a skill that isn't used a lot. It's used in less than 1% of our cardiac calls, but it obviously makes a life-saving difference when it needs to be used. So congratulations to those, and I'll turn it over to you, Mayor, if you have any comments on that particular incident.
Well, I sure do. Chief, I would add that, fire department staff, as you indicated, spend a significant amount of time training on life-saving interventions, and they may not use these skills very often, but it just shows the great value of that kind of training, and certainly paid off here. So grateful for that, and all the more reason for us to continue to provide the training that's needed for our fire department. Rick, thank you. Council, any questions or comments for Chief? Seeing none, Chief, thank you. We'll move to the next one.
All right, the next one, I'm actually presenting on behalf of Police Chief Mike Vanema and myself. This incident happened on July 3rd in the 9100 block of Franklin Avenue in Clive. And those receiving life-saving awards from the police department is Kelly Recchia. And from the fire department are Joel Oddie, Jason Glaza, Greg Glendy, Ryan Osborne, Colby Martin, and Pat Norton. On this particular incident, someone called 911 for a 20-ish-year-old female who was unresponsive. Officer Recchia arrived prior to the ambulance and was directed to a bedroom where she found the victim unresponsive, pulseless, and not breathing. Officer Recchia moved the victim to the floor and began CPR. Shortly after starting CPR, the victim began breathing with agonal respirations. Officer Recchia administered Narcan, and the victim began breathing better. When the EMS crews arrived, the victim was still breathing abnormally slow, but was breathing on her own. Her respirations were assisted by the medical crews, and more Narcan was administered. After the additional Narcan and ventilatory support, the victim regained consciousness and was transported to the hospital. Mayor?
Well, thank you, Chief, and my thanks and congratulations to all that were involved here. It's just a great example of the two departments working together day in and day out to do what we depend on them to do, and do it really well. In this case, Officer Recchia showed up first. She took action, decisive action, was able to administer Narcan and begin CPR, and and then get the backup to come in with the fire department. So just a wonderful example of our two departments working together to make a difference, and certainly it did here. And again, my congratulations to all.
Right, on the third event, I'd like to introduce, again, this one's on behalf of Chief Vanema and myself. On August 17th in the 9100 block of Carpenter Circle in Clive. On this event, the police department, Eric Minert, and from the fire department, Dustin Dickout, Autumn Edwards, Greg Glendy, Ryan Osborne, and Jason Glaza. This was another 911 call for a 20-year-old female who was unresponsive. Officer Minert arrived prior to the ambulance and was directed to a bedroom where he found the victim unresponsive with slow and very shallow breathing. They knew that this victim had a history of narcotic addiction. Officer Minert administered Narcan. On the arrival of the EMS crews, the victim was breathing but was still unresponsive. After additional administration of Narcan by the EMS crew, the victim slowly regained consciousness and was transported to the hospital. Mayor?
Chief, again, my thanks and appreciation, and speaking for all of us, for all that were involved in this situation. Just another great example of our departments working together and knowing what to do at the right time and being at the right place at the right time. Unfortunately, heroin has an incredible grip on some people within our community. It can be a true life-threatening battle, no question about it. I understand this was the same patient from an earlier life-saving award back in July. And this really just illustrates the seriousness of opioid addiction. And it exists right here in Clive and, any community around us, unfortunately. But the actions that were taken here hopefully have given the family and certainly the patient hope that they can overcome the addiction. So we're grateful for those actions. Council, any questions or comments for Chief?
Your Honor, I'd just like to say I'm really struck with how traumatic these situations must have been, not only for those who called for help, but for those providing it. And there's really nothing more valuable than saving a life. And I really credit each of the individuals being recognized tonight for doing that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments for Chief tonight? Well, Chief, thank you, and again, my thanks to everyone who participated in these three events. And these are just three events of many. So we're grateful and we're blessed for your actions. So thank you again. Okay, thank you, Chief. Do you have anything more for me?
I just want to say this is the best part of my job.
Indeed it is. I'm sure it is. Thank you. Thank you, Chief, very much. Okay, we're going to move to action items. We have 5 public hearings this evening. I'm going to read these quickly, and then we're going to work through them. So the first one is a public hearing regarding the Greenbelt Management Project. The second is a public hearing regarding zoning ordinance amendment for general regulations. The third is a 2021-2025 capital improvement plan. The fourth is the City of Waukee gas main easement. And the fifth is the public sanitary sewer easement, City of Waukee. And Matthew, did we post appropriate public notice for these public hearings?
Yes, all 5 of them were published in the Des Moines Register on November 23rd.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. We'll start with the first, Greenbelt Management Project. Richard.
Richard, before you start, this is Mayor Councilman McCoy has joined us by phone.
Michael, welcome.
Thank you.
Richard, go ahead and lead us if you would.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Pleased tonight to have before you a couple items here related to the Greenbelt Management Plan. We put out bids to find a contractor to undertake this work. We held a pre-bid required meeting so that all contractors that were interested in this project could see what's out there, what questions they might have had, and understand the scope of the project because it's so different than many projects that we normally do. We had 4 different contractor groups represented at that time. Ultimately, when we got the sealed bids, we got 2 bids. One was from EOR, and the second one was from Alpha Landscapes. Alpha Landscapes actually went together with another contractor that had actually come out to the required pre-bid meeting. The difference between them is about $175,000. Alpha Landscapes was the lowest bid on that. After going through all the bid documents, the bid prices and quantities, we believe that Alpha Landscapes is qualified to do this project, and that would be our recommendation to award this project to Alpha Landscapes.
Thank you, Richard. Council, questions for Richard?
Richard, I have a couple questions on this. Obviously, this is something different than we've ever done, and really any other communities in the areas have ever done as well. Have we worked with Alpha Landscaping before, and what do their credentials look like?
Yeah, we have not specifically worked with Alpha Landscapes, but one of their subcontractors, Extreme Tree, is a contractor that we've worked for. They've done tree removals for us on different projects across the community. Tree removal is one of the bigger elements of this project. It accounts for in the neighborhood of 25 to 30% of the entire project. We've had very good luck with Extreme Tree. In addition, we made some reference calls with Alpha Landscapes. We asked them for some of their background and information and different similar projects that they've done, and feel confident after going through the bid tab that they can do the project.
With over 70 different species of invasive species that they're to remove on this, how do we know and what type of procedures are they going to utilize to identify those over 70 different types of species for removal?
Yeah. So what we have, we've had the contract with Applied Ecological Services. They have done all the bid specifications that were taken out and put out to bid. We were using them as the expertise for this project. And that contract will continue on through the actual process of removing the invasive species, taking out the trees, killing off some of the non-native grasses and plants, and then seeding back native plants, grasses, planting trees and shrubs. And so we have Applied Ecological Services on contract to continue through that project. We do think that at some point we might need to bring back a contract amendment, maybe just to get a little bit more, just to make sure that we oversee that they're able to oversee that and we get the highest quality project possible.
Do you have a ceiling you're going to put on that contract amendment with AES? Like we said, you know, it's obviously a very favorable bid, and I love to see that. The low bidders not always get you the quality work that we're looking for in this very unique project. We know what kind of a ceiling so that we're not spending $400,000 with Alpha and another $100,000 with AES. What's your ceiling on that supplemental contract?
Yeah, right now we're in the process of talking to Applied Ecological Services and see what additional services they feel might be appropriate for the project to ensure the success. We do believe that a lot of it will probably just be some virtual pre-construction type meetings before different elements and phases are taken here. It is a 3-year project, so we will be doing a lot of work phased in over 3 different years here. And so they think a lot of that can probably be accomplished. It's probably not going to be nearly even the same amount that the original contract for them was worth, which was about $40,000.
Will they be getting back to us regularly on status updates on the project, understanding it is 3 years? Is there anything in there that gives the council updates on a regular basis?
Yes, we will absolutely do that. We will work with them. They will make, I believe, at least 5 or 6 trips down to Clive from their offices over the duration of this project, as well as numerous virtual meetings throughout the entire process. We'll also keep the council updated probably through either specific items that we'll put on the agenda, or we can keep it in the monthly report for the Leisure Services Department, but we'll keep you updated as this goes. We also have a pretty extensive communication plan to ensure that the public knows what's going to be happening out there, as well as adjacent property owners. We'll be reaching out specifically to every property owner that lives adjacent to this area that's going to be worked on. We're also going to be putting out press releases, working on earned news media with Pete, and social media, digital newsletters, as well as the utility newsletter. We're working on an article to put out there right now. So we're really going to kind of hit the ground to let everyone know what's going on out there and what to expect for the duration of the project.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council, additional questions for Richard?
I just have
Mike, go ahead.
The Alpha landscaping is new to me as well, though I do know that I'm pretty sure they won another fairly significant bid here recently for more another landscape project later in the fall. And so as new as they are to me, I just worry, I wonder about their capacity, but, and you don't know about all of them, maybe the ones that they've won, you know, bids they're on, but hopefully they feel very comfortable with this significant project as well as another significant one. And I don't know if there was a discussion on that or not, but.
Yeah, one of the things, because they were unfamiliar to us, we wanted to make sure that we felt like they could perform the project, that they had the background, and ultimately that they had the ability to do that. And so we went pretty closely through their bid tab to ensure that the numbers made sense. They were quite a bit lower than the estimated $550,000 of what we thought the project would cost. And so we wanted to make sure that it wasn't a blind shot, something that they weren't familiar with or could perform. And having Extreme Tree on there is something that we're comfortable with because we have worked with them and we know they do good work. That's a big part of that project. That's the first part of the project that we'll see with the tree removals this winter and into early spring. But also at the same time, we want to make sure that the bid numbers made sense. You know, that quantities and the time and the amount that they put on each one of those items didn't make the most sense. And after going through that and also sending it to Applied Ecological Services, they felt like they made sense. You know, obviously there was some numbers on both bids that they weren't quite sure why they put them that way, but overall felt that that was a solid bid.
Richard, I know that the communication will be really, really important. You've outlined all of the platforms that we can do that with our residents, but anytime we start removing trees around here, you know, we all pay attention to that. And so the communication is going to be pretty important.
Yep.
What we're doing, how we're doing it, what our replacement level is going to be, and what the scope of the project is. I think what Eric was looking for earlier was a not to exceed number in the contract, and I don't recall if that was in there or not.
Yes, yeah, we believe that they can do that for the amount that they have bid that on. Obviously, if something unforeseen comes up, we may recommend a change order, but in a project like this, it's a pretty easily seen what's out there. We know what all the trees and the grasses and the shrubs are out there. They had the ability to see that ahead of time. So we think it's a pretty low probability that we would bring forward a change order of any substance.
John, did you have something?
I was going to close the public hearing, Your Honor.
I'll second.
It's moved by John, seconded by Michael to close the public hearing. But before we do, is there anybody here to speak on this item? If so, please reach out to Pete and let him know that you're here so he can connect you with us.
And that's *9 for folks who are on the phone, if you'd like to raise your hand. Mayor, I do not see any hands going up.
Seeing none, will the council please vote? Passes 5-0 to close the public hearing.
Move the resolution approving plans and specs.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Michael. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? Passes 5-0.
Move the receipt of bids.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Michael. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? That passes 5-0.
Move the resolution awarding the contract to Alpha Landscapes in the amount of $401,830.15.
I will second, and I just need a comment, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So I will second, but I'm, you know, along with Eric's comment, with a bid so low, I think it's just, it's something to keep a very close eye on, right, with the change orders. And I think Eric's concerns are legit when you have such a big difference there, but otherwise then support.
Understood. And again, the amount is $401,832.15. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Richard. We'll look forward to monitoring the progress on the project. Okay, the second public hearing is regarding zoning ordinance amendment for general regulations, and Jill is going to lead us in that one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to share my screen here. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, so in the, what you have before you is a public hearing and first consideration of the final draft for Chapter 4 General Regulations. We've had many discussions over this over the past year or so, so we're excited to bring you the final version. I included in your packet the red line copy so you can see what's different from the original, and then a clean version just for ease as well. And then a summary also of the major changes that were made to the chapter. So in the end, wanting to keep things moving along tonight, I know you have a long agenda in front of you. I figured I'd just go through this fairly quickly. If you like to interrupt and stop me at any moment, please do so, and we can talk about the changes more in depth, or if you went through the packet and you notice anything that you'd like to bring up, please go ahead and we will discuss. So the first few chapters here, like we talked about, everything is pretty much the same, just a little bit updating and wording to make it easier for folks to understand and a little more clear, but no substantial changes for the first few sections that are introductory. The next revision clearance, we had discussed having, giving staff the opportunity to ask for an engineering analysis when we feel a street for either less traffic or more traffic reasons that vision clearance may need to be modified. Street frontage is pretty much the same. Accessory buildings is a big one we discussed, and the first major change that we have a new photo here that with different setbacks, it just needed to be updated. And like we talked about, as staff, we came up with a criteria here for large and small accessory buildings as an easy way to give those different types of structures a little bit more flexibility where they need to be, and a little bit less where for those larger buildings that shouldn't. So we came up with 75 square feet as the cutoff for a large or small accessory building. So anything above 75 square feet we have as a large building. And that sticks with most everything that was already in this chapter for accessory buildings. So things like location, setbacks has been updated to mirror the building code. So it changed from 10 feet to 5 feet. And then design criteria as well stayed with the original wording of what's in blue here to match a principal structure. And then for accessory buildings small, so anything under 75 square feet, that seemed to be a pretty typical like prefab unit that, you know, many people purchase from a home improvement store, like your Rubbermaid, Sterilite type buildings. That's the kind of thing that we wanted to give flexibility for now in this chapter. So if someone purchases something like that, then, you know, it obviously isn't going to match the house, nor does it need to. It doesn't need to have, you know, setback from a building. They'd be in the middle of a yard type of thing, so it didn't really fit. So as discussed, that's the best way we figured out to differentiate those two uses, but still keep a high quality standard, but have a lot more flexibility for folks as well. And then just some general standards here that were already in the chapter, and those have stayed the same. Another big thing we talked about here was the maximum height. So we changed it to 15 feet instead of 12. And that's really, for all intents and purposes, the same as what was before, because we're measuring it from grade to maximum height. We were measuring it to the midpoint of the roof. So with that easier clarity of measurement and wording here, it's really the same height overall, just a better way to do it. So did anyone have any comments on that one, since that's one of our major items that we discussed? All right, wonderful, keep going. Accessory structures, we just talked about a few things here. The main one was decks that are larger than 50 square feet. We added the provision to allow those in side yards as well. For a lot of reasons, those can definitely be useful in side yards for a lot of folks. Updated a little bit of wording here for clarity and giving a little more flexibility for some structures, additions of parkways. I just wanted to point out, if anyone noticed this deletion of the retaining walls section, this is taken care of in the building code. Not that we don't care about it, but it's really a building issue. And then if that height requirement gets changed in the building code at all, it doesn't need to be updated here, and it's already taken care of someplace else. Another one we kind of discussed in depth was the outdoor areas and activities. So we went over quite a bit on kind of outdoor product display, vending, outdoor sales types of things. So what we came up with here is keeping it pretty clean and simple in this chapter, that items may be placed outdoor for sale with the following criteria. So obviously, they can't block traffic or pedestrian circulation, safety, things like that. They need to maintain a sidewalk. It sounded like between council and Planning and Zoning Commission that everyone felt pretty comfortable with that, so we added this section. And then for yard coverage, we had some changes here as well to the maximum yard coverage area. So overall, it sounded like council wanted to give folks a little more flexibility for yard coverage. So what we came up with was a maximum coverage of 30% for front and side yards, and a maximum of 50% for rear yards for impervious surfaces. And then just added the provision of if someone's front yard was very tight and they couldn't quite make the 30%, but obviously you need to still be able to get a driveway to a permitted garage, that type of thing, that's in there. Any questions or concerns here so far? Right. Added a visual for that. In the special events, we got rid of the outdoor sales since we took care of that in the previous chapter. So that gives folks a little more flexibility. It sounded like everyone was pretty happy with the businesses in Clive and giving them more flexibility in that area. Seasonal sales remains the same, as well as the special events. That just makes it a little more clear. Home occupations is the same. We have a few here in a row that are not much changes. Same with communication, equipment. Subdivision associations, we included a couple more items that they should be responsible for. And then there was the concern about when the developer takes over responsibility. And so we included a line in there as well. Prohibition for sales of alcoholic beverages through a drive-through and adult businesses are the same. The exceptions chapter, we just added a little bit of wording to clean this section up a little bit, and then a list of ordinary projections to make that clear in the code what's a projection and what's not a projection. So anything that's not listed wouldn't be. Automobile sales are pretty much the same. And then this renewable energy systems is the other one that was a big add. So obviously we added solar here, and then combined the two chapters because we noticed a lot of the items that are for wind or solar could definitely be combined. So most of what you see here in this general regulations section is what was already listed for wind systems. So nothing has been deleted. It's just been moved around a little bit. So these are for both wind and solar, but it's pretty much wording that was already in the chapter, just moved locations a little bit. So wind energy systems are the same. Anything you see deleted pretty much just got moved to the general regulations section. And then for solar, we added that. And it's pretty standard language to our neighbors, keeping in line with what other communities are doing for solar. So to remind you, what we discussed was anything that's kind of a building integrated system. You know, if the shingles that already have solar built in, or if it's a building mounted, you know, the panel system on a roof, something like that. We have provisions for those, for location, height, to keep that standard and of high quality design. And then for ground mounted systems, we had discussed those really being appropriate for commercial or industrial zones, and that they require a special use permit and a site plan, so we can make sure those are appropriate for the location. And then just some bulk regulations for those, size, location, things like that. So that's covered. And then pawnbrokers is the same, and that is it. This was approved by Planning and Zoning Commission last week with just some few minor changes that were in your packet. So we are, unless you have anything to add or any questions, feel free.
Council, questions for Jill. I know it's a lot there, but she streamlined it pretty well for us, so thank you, Jill. So council, any comments, suggestions, questions? And Jill, you're looking for the first reading on this evening?
Correct.
Hearing no questions, I would take a motion. Or, excuse me, we won't take a motion yet.
I'd move to close the public hearing.
Thank you, John. Moved by John, seconded by Eric to close the public hearing. Further discussion? And before we do, is there anybody here to speak on this item? If so, please make yourself known to Pete so we can plug you in for us.
Mayor, I do not see any hands going up.
Okay, seeing no further discussion with the council, please vote to close the public hearing. It's 5-0 to close.
I'd move that ordinance number 1098, having been considered by council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
It's moved by Michael, seconded by Eric. Further discussion? Seeing none, with the council, please vote. Passes 5-0 for the first reading. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to public hearing number 3, which is regarding the 2021-2025 Capital Improvement Program. And Doug, you're going to lead us on this one.
Yes, I will. Thank you. What you have before you is the consideration of the proposed capital improvement plan for the next 5 years. It represents approximately $67 million worth of investment in our community in a number of different areas. We continue to be in a position to develop this capital improvement plan consistent with your strategic directives. As you're aware, significant effort has gone into ensuring that we have funding for streets and other roadway improvements. We also have significant investments in our parks and trail system. And as you all are aware, a lot of our projects also involve some integration with stormwater management. So those dollars are programmed throughout the various projects themselves. We went through the detailed project descriptions and the proposed financing at a previous work session, so I won't go through that unless you have any specific questions at this time. the plan that is included in your packet is very consistent with the material that was previously presented. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and following that, I would recommend approval of the proposed capital improvement plan.
Thank you, Doug. Council, questions for Doug?
Doug, have we received any feedback regarding the CIP?
No specific comments from the public. We do have some developer interest that keep tabs on where you position your funds in terms of some of the projects that would be of interest to them. But in terms of general comments, I have not received any.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by John to close the public hearing. Before we do, is there anybody here to speak on this item? If so, make yourself known to Pete so he can plug you in.
Mayor, I don't see any hands going up.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote to close public hearing? That passes 5-0.
Move the resolution approving the 21 to 25 capital improvement plan.
Second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by John. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And that passes 5-0. Thank you, Doug. It's a great plan, and we'll look forward to working on it together. A lot before us. Okay, public hearing number 4 with the City of Waukee gas main easement. Jim is going to lead us on this one.
One moment, Your Honor. I just had to bring Jim up into the co-host. Jim, can you hear us? You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
You bet, Jim. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. The City of Waukee is requesting an easement for the expansion of their gas network in developing areas west of Alice's Road and north of Meredith Drive. As shown on the location map included in your packet, the requested easement is on the west side of Alice's Road in the northeast corner of the City of Clive's park property. All the gas mains in the area will be bored in an appropriate depth so as not to be impacted by the future expansion of Alice's Road. If necessary, sole responsibility for maintenance or any future relocations would lie solely with the City of Waukee. With that, staff would recommend granting the easement. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jim. I guess the question I have, this is directly on the west side of the street from the existing gas main that was just placed there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's interesting that we have gas mains directly across the street from each other. I'm interested in how that ended up that way, but I digress. Council, questions for Jim?
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
It's moved by John, seconded by Eric to close the public hearing. Before we do, is there anybody here to speak on this item? If so, make yourself known to Pete so he can connect you with us.
Mayor, I do not see any hands going up.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Any further discussion, council? Hearing none, will the council please vote to close the public hearing? That passes 5-0 to close the public hearing.
Move the resolution granting permanent gas main easement to the City of Waukee.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Eric. Further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? Passes 5-0. Thank you, Jim. Okay, we'll move to the last public hearing for this evening regarding public sanitary sewer easement with the city of Waukee. And Doug, you're going to lead us on this one.
Certainly. Similar to the comments made by Jim, City of Waukee is requesting consideration of a permanent sanitary sewer easement in this case along a portion of the city's Greenbelt property along Warrior Lane. It's a very small encumbrance on the city's property adjacent to what will be roadway right-of-way for Warrior Lane. It is for the facilitation construction of sanitary trunk sewer to support quite a large area north of Little Walnut Creek and west of Warrior Lane. At this time, we don't have any particular concerns or questions with respect to the proposed facility. Similar to the easement that was granted for gas, it does accommodate provisions that require the city of Waukee to be responsible for the utility and the relocation of the facility if necessary in the future. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we would recommend approval.
Doug, will that sanitary sewer support any Clive residents, or how does that work?
In this particular case, the city of Clyde will have no need to connect to their sanitary sewer. We have appropriate facilities to support all of the Clyde property.
Other questions, council, for Doug?
Hey, Doug, this is Ted.
Ted, go ahead.
Sorry, Eric. Yeah, so for both the last one and this one, they're permanent easements. Are we comfortable that there's no development or nothing that's going to be needed in those locations ever, because these are permanent?
Yes, in terms of the implication of granting the easement for both of these facilities, I have no concerns that they are going to be impacting any of our future permanent improvements, whether or not that's our own utility or roadway improvements or other site improvements. So I'm not concerned with that at all. That being said, we did ensure in both easement documents and as we have done in the past with other similar easements, we have reserved the right or put the responsibility on the city of Waukee to relocate the facility if it is in conflict with any of our future needs.
Okay, thanks, Doug.
Other questions, council? Eric, go ahead.
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by John to close the public hearing. Before we do so, is there anybody here to speak on this item? And if so, please reach out to Pete so that he can connect you with us.
Mayor, I don't see any hands going up.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Further discussion, council? Seeing none, will the council please vote to close public hearing? Passes 5-0.
Move the resolution approving public sanitary sewer easement to the city of Waukee.
Second.
Moved by Eric, seconded by John. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? That passes 5-0. Thank you, Doug. Okay, item 6 is a resolution approving the annual financial audit report for FY 1920. Presentation by Brad Thiessen and Edie Bailey. Joyce, you're going to lead us on this one.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council members. We have before you tonight for your approval is the final annual financial report for fiscal year 20. And as you remember, we had a new auditor this year, Ide Bailey, and we were very pleased with making the change. And we had a very good audit. It was thorough. And I think it was probably one of the better audits we've had since I've been here. So I'm very pleased. And with that, I'll introduce to you Brad Tyson, and he will walk you through it.
Thank you, Joyce. As Joyce said, my name is, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you bet. Go ahead.
As Joyce said, my name is Brad Tyson. I'm a manager with Ide Bailey CPAs. We're based out of Dubuque, Iowa, and this is our first year doing the audit. We do audits of several cities and entities your size, so it kind of fits right in our niche. I'll talk just maybe a little bit about the process first and then go through the financial statements after that. In terms of a process, we started planning for the audit in June and July this year, and we approached field work. Field work was scheduled for mid-September, the week of Labor Day. And normally, we would come on site for about a week and go through the books and review invoices and confirmations and things of that nature. Things were a little bit different in the auditing field industry this year with COVID, so we did a lot of our work remotely this year for the first time, which you would think would have a significant impact upon the work that we're doing. But actually this year, with all of the technology that's available, it actually worked pretty well. So I'm kind of happy to have that experience behind us, and we're definitely looking forward to getting on site next year though. So we did most of our field work in September and sort of wrapped up in October, and issued the report in early November. So I have the report in front of me here, and I hope everyone else does too. I'll just kind of run through it real quick just to make sure everyone has an understanding of it. And if you have any questions, I guess just stop me at any point. The biggest thing with the report is probably our opinion on the financial statements, which is located on page 2. The opinion kind of addresses our responsibilities versus the responsibilities of the city. The city is responsible for presenting the financial statement information fairly and accurately. They're responsible for internal controls and designing internal controls and maintaining internal control on a daily basis. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on the financial statements based on the way they're presented. And we're sort of governed by 2 different auditing standards. Generally accepted auditing standards, which is governed by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. It also, since it's a city and you're governed by the laws of the state of Iowa, Chapter 11 of the Code of Iowa requires the city to have an audit underneath generally accepted governmental auditing standards too. So the 2 kind of mirror each other for the most part. There are some additional standards that the governmental auditing standards require. One of those is an additional report on internal controls, which we'll get to, which is located in the back of the report. One other thing I'd like to talk about too, just very quickly, and it's located in our opinion as well, is our review of internal controls. I know there's a little bit of a misconception out there about internal controls. Management is responsible for those internal controls. We review those internal controls as part of our financial statement audit, looking for high-level controls to make sure that they're in place. And we're doing that on a test basis, but we're not giving an opinion on internal controls of the city. So there's a little bit of a difference there. We're not giving an opinion saying that the internal controls are effective. We're only looking at certain types of controls throughout the audit, just to make sure that there's no internal control deficiencies for us to report. So that's kind of all located on page 1, and page 2 is probably the biggest part of the opinion. It talks about how we agree with the financial statements, the way they're presented, when we give a clean opinion on the financial statements, basically. And then it kind of goes through some of the other information that's located within the report and the different responsibilities that we have for that information as well. As we progress into the report, page 5 through page 11 is management's discussion and analysis, and this is a great 5 or 6 pages to sort of review the year-over-year changes of the financial statements or financial position of the city. Especially, I believe, on pages 8 and 9, it kind of gives a comparison of 2019 versus 2020 in terms of program receipts, and program disbursements. So you can see the major changes there from year to year. And then as you go further into the report, the basic financial statements, which are sort of the meat and potatoes of the report, start on page 12. And that kind of starts with what we call the statement of activities. The statement of activities is basically like an income statement. And it goes through, you know, the financial position at the start of the year all the way to the end of the year. It's a little bit backwards from what you might be used to seeing in a private sector. It starts with disbursements first, so all of your expenses are presented first, and then some of the program receipts that offset those expenses are presented next to sort of give a view of the net burden on the city in terms of property taxes. After that, we have the major fund level statements. So there's different types of funds of the city. You have your governmental activities and your business type activities. Your governmental activities are more funded by, you know, property taxes, local option sales taxes, road use taxes, those types of things. And then your enterprise funds or your business type activities are funded more by charges for services too. So we have a couple different statements on cash receipts, disbursements, and changes in cash balances, which present some of the more significant funds of the city that are presented there as well. And then from there, we get into the notes to the financial statements, which start on page 17. The notes to the financial statements are also part of the basic financial statements, so they're underneath our audit opinion. And it talks about some of the more significant account balances and significant transaction classes of the city. So it has, you know, some more background information about cash and investments, long-term debt, and about some of the pensions of the city as well. And then after the notes is some other supplementary information that's provided. One of those is the budget to actual statement. There's also some information that's provided on sort of like a long-term history of both the Iowa Public Employees Retirement System and the Municipal Fire and Police Retirement System as well. And then after you get through that, we've presented some of the smaller funds of the city, some what we call the combining funds of the city in the back of the report. So those are sort of under a different opinion than the items that are presented in the front. These are sort of smaller funds of the city, so they don't get, you know, sort of they don't have as big of a spotlight that we shine on them when we go through our audit report, but they're aggregated in the back and then put into the front of the report in sort of one major or non-major column, I should say. So there's a little bit of a difference there too, but you can see some of those funds are like the road use tax fund, local option sales tax fund, things of that nature too. So, and then as you get further towards the back, there's some more supplementary information on individual long-term debt issues of the city. So you can kind of see that and see how it relates to the notes to the financial statements as well. Probably the biggest thing in the report, ironically, is probably one of the last couple pages of the report. And it is our report on internal controls of the city. So as I was talking about before, when we perform an audit under generally accepted government auditing standards, we're required to put a report together on our analysis of internal controls as we reviewed them as part of our financial statement process. In this report happens to be or should be publicly available, so it's in the back of the report for everyone to see. And what it has to do with is it sort of defines three different types of control deficiencies. There's your normal sort of very small control deficiencies. If it grows from there, we would report some sort of significant deficiency, which is a little bit larger scale. And then from there, we have a material weakness. Those are sort of the three categories of internal controls that we would report upon. So when we went through the internal controls of the city, you know, for the most part, we didn't have any reportable items to report to the council or to those who read the financial statements, other than one item. And so we have disclosed one item on page 57, and it is a material weakness. And I'll just jump out in front of this and say, because a lot of times when we say there's a material weakness within the city, it's kind of shocking and it's kind of scary to hear. But this is something that, for the most part, a lot of cities deal with. And what it is is both generally accepted auditing standards, which is governed by the AICPA again, and generally accepted governmental auditing standards kind of recognize that there's an internal control deficiency anytime an entity has their independent auditor put together their financial statement report, which is pretty typical, actually very typical of most cities in the state of Iowa. And for the most part, this does not rise to the level of a material weakness and may not be reported. This year we did have one journal entry that we suggested as part of our audit process. And so anytime you kind of couple those two together, we sort of have to report, we have to kind of bump it up into a material weakness category. Now, from my standpoint, I have no concerns, you know, on this sort of reportable condition. And I believe that next year, if we go through the audit, we do not find any sort of audit adjustments or entries, that this might not be any sort of reportable condition at that point in time. But again, since we coupled it with a journal entry that we proposed this year, we sort of had to report it as a material weakness within the financial statements. But it is very, it's sort of, the journal entries are easy to fix. The preparation of the financial statements is not easy to fix. That would require the city to sort of have staff available to put the financial statements together, which is a long drawn out process and takes a lot of time, which is why it's very typical for an audit firm of our size to put together financial statements. So again, when you read that, it sounds sort of scary, but it's definitely nothing to be too concerned about. And then on the very last page, there's also some required statutory reporting that we need to go through. The state auditor has us kind of look at certain items as part of our audit, you know, in terms of you know, certifying the budget or submitting the annual urban renewal report or looking at travel expenses, those sorts of things. And we did not have any issues with any of those items that we were required to report on. So with that, I think that's sort of my overview of the financial statement process and the audit. Is there any questions at all?
Actions that we take to address that material weakness?
So again, so this is something that a lot of cities have their independent auditor prepare the financial statements for one reason. In order to overcome that sort of internal control deficiency, management would have to have a person available to put the financial statements together, which is a lot to ask, not only from a time standpoint, but from a competency standpoint too. There's just a lot there that goes into it. It requires a lot of hours too. So it's very typical that that most cities sort of have their independent auditor perform this. Now, if the city wanted to do this, they could, but it's something that is pretty typical in the industry that the auditor has done. So
sounds to me like it's not very cost effective for us to do something like that for a low impact type of procedure like this.
That's a much better way to say it than the way I was trying to say it. Yes.
Well, I want to tag onto this, Eric, if I may, but I'm still hearing that it's a material deficiency, that we had our internal auditor prepare the financial statements, but for us to have somebody else that's not an internal auditor prepare our statements would be costly or whatever. But I don't understand where this is all going. Because it sounds like it's a material deficiency, but then it's like no big deal because everybody does it.
Yeah, it's a requirement of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants that anyone who prepares a financial statement or has a financial statement has the sort of wherewithal and the time and everything to put together the financial statements. And maybe I should clarify this. So ordinarily, you know, if we go through the audit and we have no issues, no adjustments or anything like that, we can sort of come to the fact that internal control deficiency by itself is just an internal control deficiency. It doesn't rise to the level of significant deficiency or material weakness. This year, since there was an audit adjustment that we recommended during the process, those two coupled together sort of makes it rise to that next level where we have to report it. So there was those two issues together. And so again, next year, if we go through the audit process and there's no adjustments, I would expect that there would be no internal control deficiency reported next year.
Joyce, you've indicated already that this is one of the better audits that you've seen in your time with us. You're
Yes.
comfortable with that?
Yes, I am, Your Honor.
Other questions, counsel, for Brad? Well, if there are none, I want to congratulate Joyce and staff on a very good audit. And we appreciate that work, and it's kind of where the rubber meets the road for us. So thank you, Joyce, and Brad, thank you. Counsel, any other questions? Sorry?
Move the resolution approving it.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Michael. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And that passes 5-0. Joyce, thank you, and Brad, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to item number 7, which is the preliminary and final plat for Holmes Mini Storage Plat 2. Jill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Screen up here. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, so what you have before you is the preliminary and final plat for Holmes Mini Storage Plat 2. Essentially, this is the corner right up the street from City Hall. So both of these lots are on 114th Street, just south of Smart Honda and north of our Greenbelt Trail and mulch site. So essentially, this is just a lot split of what's been currently built versus the vacant portion of the lot. So the northern leg of this lot has already been constructed with the mini storage site. The plan initially was to phase the construction into the lots on the northern side and then more buildings on this western side. The owner now desires to separate the two lots right at the junction here and sell off lot 2 for development. So a couple things with this one. There's an agreement to complete for the water line that runs from lot 1 to lot 2 to cap that, and then the future owner of lot 2 will be required to remove the abandoned portion of the water line and then reconnect on the western side of 114th Street. There's water and sanitary over here for an easy connection. There's also a stormwater management plan, since both lots are still going to be using the stormwater detention basin that is on lot 2. And then a no-build easement, since this existing building on lot 1 is close to the property line. If something were to be built here, which it's unreasonable to do so because the stormwater basin's here, it would kick in a lot of fire protection for this building. So it just kind of cleans everything up to have that. Lot 1 by itself meets all the planting and open space requirements. So staff is happy with that. There's obviously also a lot of potential open space landscaping already in place on lot 2 as well. Everything in the comment letter has been satisfied, and this was unanimously approved last week by Planning and Zoning Commission. I'll take any questions, or the applicant, Mike Wheeler with Bishop Engineering, is also here. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Jill. Council, questions for Jill?
Joe, what's lot number 2 zoned as?
Let's see, I have that. It is a M1. Both lots are, and they will remain M1. There's no planned rezoning.
I do have a question. And this might go to Doug more so, but you may have dealt with it. Did we give? I remember when the original site came on. Did we give any special consideration to the exterior of that? Because that originally was going to be a build out of that entire rental deal going into that L shape. And so did we give any exterior consideration because of that on that, I don't know what you call it, the southwest side of that, rental facility? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's something in place for that. I didn't look specifically since it's just a lot separation at this point. When we get to a site plan, if there's something in place, they would obviously need to meet that. I'm not sure if Doug remembers something.
The primary consideration when we worked through the mini storage site was to ensure that the portions of the project that were facing the public street, so in this case, north, kind of the first phase of the project, and then in the future, the west portion of the project that would face out to 114th Street. We did have considerations to ensure that the facades of those portions of the building facing out maintained a appropriate architectural aesthetic. In this particular case, that aesthetic is established with the first phase that faces north. Obviously, what's been built is what will stay. In the future, in this circumstance, the lot 2 will be sold to someone else. It is probably not likely to be mini storage. It will be some other type of use in which a site plan will be reviewed and ultimately need approval from this body. And any considerations for architectural standards or aesthetics of that building and facade and site will certainly be your discretion to review and consider. So the specific answer is there's really nothing that's associated with the mini storage that will necessarily be pulled through onto this lot 2. Lot 2 will be its own unique request, and they'll need to satisfy the requirements at the time of that submittal.
And we wouldn't have done any special consideration for the exterior of lot 1, originally thinking that it was the same owner and thinking that it was going to be a continuation with the gate and all that. Meaning, did we ease ease some of those things for the first owner? And now we're not going to follow. We would have been different if it would have been like this up front.
No, we ensured that we had all of the standards kind of uniformly applied. Ensure that, again, those front facades that are facing out got an appropriate treatment. The south boundaries, and that was required of the first phase. So the entirety of the south boundary across now what is lot 1 and proposed lot 2 has all been planted and in place. Very substantial buffering materials. So again, no, there were no considerations or relaxation standards because we expected this phase 2 to somehow screen or buffer what is part of phase 1. That would not be the case. We got everything that we expected out of the development.
Perfect. Thank you.
Other questions, council, for Jill or Doug?
Move approval of the preliminary plat.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Susan. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? Passes 5-0.
Move the resolution approving the final plat.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Susan. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? That passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Okay, we'll move to item number 8 now. This is proposed ordinance number 1097, amending ordinance number 1034 pertaining to CPI adjustments to compensation of mayor and council. And Joyce, you have this one.
Yes, good evening again. So this ordinance amendment essentially just changes the CPI reference that the ordinance speaks to. And inadvertently, when we approved that in 2017, the CPI reference is based on the 12 months previous. So that means when it comes out, it's after January 1. It's typically like mid-February before we get that CPI reference, and then we have to go back and adjust your salaries back to January. So if we made it consistent with the one that we utilize for staff, it comes out in October for the previous 12 months. So that's really the only reason for the change. It just kind of streamlines the process a little bit. So, and then just according to state code, it could affect compensation. But so we had to make sure we did it this way. So it will not take effect until January of 2022 after the next election. So since there's no hurry, I would recommend we just go ahead and do 3 separate readings of it. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions for Joyce, council? And you're looking for the first reading tonight, Joyce?
That would be perfect.
Okay.
Move that ordinance number 1097 be voted for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
You read that as well as I did. I was just on mute.
Moved by John, seconded by Susan. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? That passes 5-0, so that completes the first reading. Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 9 is a resolution approving the City of Clive 2021 legislative priorities. Matt?
Thank you, Your Honor. On the agenda before you this evening is a follow-up from the discussion in November. We talked through some revised changes to the 2021 legislative priorities that this City Council considers and adopts that we use for the upcoming legislative session. And so basically what's in the packet tonight is the cleaned up version of those priorities following our discussion in November. Not aware of any other further changes to that. Pending your approval of it tonight, we have I have some meetings queued up for our legislators to start sharing this information with them prior to the January session starting. So with that, Your Honor, I would welcome any questions and encourage adoption.
Questions for Matt, council?
Move the resolution.
Well,
Was that a second, Michael?
yes.
It's moved by Eric, seconded by Michael. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote?
Having some language problems tonight, Mayor. Sorry.
Happens to me all the time. That passes 5-0. Thank you, Matt. Okay, item 10 is approving the 2021 rates for city legal services regarding Master Good PC. Matt.
Thank you, Your Honor. On an annual basis, the council considers the rates for the coming year for the legal services that are provided to us by the Master Good law firm with Christina and her team. That letter is included in your packet for your consideration. A couple things to note. Number one, the rates are proposed to be unchanged from the 2020 rates, so there's no increase in the rates for the coming year. There is some adjustments to our legal team with a new prosecutor coming on that's already started to work on some of our prosecutions as of the council is likely aware, there's quite a prosecution backlog right now with the pandemic, and so we have a pretty large chunk of that happening right now. Also, did an informal survey of kind of where rates are at, legal rates are at with other cities in the metro that use contracted legal services. I provided that overview to the council earlier today with my recommendation to continue forward with NIMASTER Good, and Christina and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Matt. Council, questions for Matt?
Yeah, I had this pulled off the consent agenda just because I think it's important for us to review services on a regular basis. I know it's been 2013 since we last pulled surrounding communities for information based on rates, things of that nature. This year is the first year of doing accounting. It's just good to test the waters out there to make sure that we're getting competitive rates out there on a regular basis. And I think we are. I also had some other questions and concerns. I think those were answered as well. I will be keeping moving forward. I think we're getting good service, but that remains to be somewhat of a concern.
Other questions for Matt, council?
I'd move approval.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Michael. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? That passes 5-0. Thank you, Matt. Okay, item 11 is approving the pay request number 6, final request for RDG planning and design on the Northwest Parks concept plans for $910.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Michael. Further discussion?
Your Honor, I'll be abstaining.
Thank you, Susan. So noted. Any other questions? Hearing none, will the council please vote? That passes 4 in favor with 1 abstention. Thank you. Okay, item 12 is approving a pay request number 10 for RDG planning and design on the Westgate Parkway Bridge, $487.50.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Eric. Further discussion?
Your Honor, I'll be abstaining again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Susan. So noted. Any other questions? Hearing none, will the council please vote? And that passes 4 in favor with 1 abstention. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move to discussion items now. And the first, well, the only one is regarding the 2021 Community Engagement Plan. And Pete, you've got this.
Thank you, Your Honor. I enjoy this presentation annually, and I'm glad it's become a regular part of the way that we think about how we are going to intentionally engage with our community in the coming year. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. One moment. All right. Is everybody able to see this?
You bet.
Great. So let's start by talking about some good news from this past year, because later on in this presentation, we're going to be getting into some challenging news as well as we think about what we face with the ongoing public health emergency and the responsibility that the city has to keep trying to help people be safe, stay healthy. But first, some good news. The census this year was a great success. It was an improvement on our performance from the previous census in terms of self-response rate. And given the good work that was done by residents in Clive, I feel very good that we will have an accurate account of how many residents live in the city at this point. The stats, where we rank, I'm really proud. I was hoping we were going to be able to inch ahead of Urbandale. We ended up tying with Urbandale, put us at number one for cities with over 10,000 people in the state of Iowa. When you compare us, though, to the rest of the country or even all Iowa cities, we also look very, very good. Our residents did a great job. They got the information they needed to participate. They felt confident about the process, and they partnered well with our census takers and other census partners. The last two bullets there on the page are two that I'm particularly proud of. When we can go and actually ask our residents how they feel about the information that they're being presented, do they trust it? Is it timely? Is it accurate? That's as big a mark, that's as good a mark, I think, as we can hope to get. That's the gold standard for understanding whether or not your community engagement is high quality or not. And our residents are telling us right now that it is. In the bottom there, you see a couple other sort of representations of that quality, that value that residents are finding in our public engagement and our communications as well. Everything that you see on the page here is an affirmation of, I think, the strategy that the city is taking when we think about community engagement. It is not something that lives in one department. It doesn't live with just the city managers. It lives with every single department. It lives with the mayor and council as well. And that dispersed approach, when all of us are clear on what are the priorities that we need to be communicating about, and when all of us are confident that we've got teammates who have our back, who, if we have a question, we can go to them, or if we need technical expertise, we can go to them and we can get something accurate and timely to those businesses and those residents. That's how it all comes together. But absent that team approach, I don't think our communications and community engagement would be valued the way that our residents are very clearly telling us that it's valued. So kudos to all of you for a year of excellent work, and we look forward to building upon this strong foundation because we do have room for improvement. Let's talk about the top story in 2020. It's going to be the top engagement challenge, I think, for the city in 2021 as well. We never saw it coming, but for the past, since almost a year now, this has been the top topic that we have been communicating with residents and businesses about. Our approach from the start has been to focus on consistency with our public health officials and persuasion, not compulsion, to take those steps that our public health officials have asked us to take and that our elected officials have asked us to take. Making sure that we are always being consistent and clear has been a challenge for a couple of reasons. First, just the nature of the emergency. What we knew about the pandemic, what we knew about the virus at the beginning of the year was very little, certainly very little compared to what we know now as we're on the doorstep of vaccines. That created a unique set of challenges. One way to sort of see that here on the slide is, you'll remember when we were first thinking about playground equipment, was it going to be safe for kids to be playing on it or not? And we decided to err on the side of caution. As we've moved further into the pandemic, though, we now understand that while there is some risk for spreading the virus on surfaces, that's a much, much lower risk, especially when it's outside, compared to when you're very close to somebody and breathing the same air and potentially getting some of those aerosol droplets. We also know in general now that outside activities can be much safer than those indoor activities as well. That's another place where we need to grow in understanding. I appreciate all the work that my colleagues did to keep adapting and thinking about where we were going to be on all of this, because as the pandemic was evolving, we also know there was quite a bit of pressure coming to public leaders to go one direction or another. Sort of the line that I've used at different points was politics versus science equals politics. That's not to say that there weren't and there aren't very serious political considerations in the pandemic about what the right policy responses are. But when it comes to our own communications as a city, especially with our nonpartisan status, we wanted to make sure that we were keeping things very squarely in that science space, very squarely in that persuasion space, and following the direction of the scientists and the public health officials. We also wanted to make sure we kept things upbeat. The goats were a great and have been a great way for us to do some important things for the community, telling people that this is sort of scary, but it's also something that we can approach with some fun. And we need to, so that we are showing folks that this is not something that is scary, but it's actually something that is solvable, showing folks that this is something that is simple and something that is commonplace, that we can all do this together. Finally, with the GOATs, but then also through projects like the Partnerships Small Business Grant Program, which we funded to specifically take care of some struggling Clive businesses. Those were other opportunities we've used to keep showing folks that from a community standpoint that we can solve this with will and with endurance and with grit. We can get through this and we can help each other get through it as well. There in the bottom right-hand pictures, right-hand corner is one of my favorite pictures I've taken this year. That's the second check presentation we've made from sales of the Greenbelt Goat masked merchandise. At this point, we are up to almost $2,000 that we've been able to contribute just from the proceeds of the sales of those pieces of merch. Any questions about where we've been thus far with our pandemic and community engagement?
I just had to put a pitch out on the goats again, Pete. You say it was a way to teach them, that a little bit of fun and stuff. And, one big thing when I was down there quite often, especially at the early onset of this thing, was the families being able to get out. And they did come down there as families and walk down, in the spring when everything was shut down. And the kids, and many of them saying it was a regular trip, for them once a week or twice a week. And staff has done a fantastic job having them out and visible, instead of kind of closing that down, which could have been easy. But it's been an outlet for a lot of people. And so for that, and I know it's taken your entire team to do that. So I appreciate it. And I know even the retirement home over there by the pool, you've moved them back and forth over there, and it's given them, I've talked to so many of them, talking to them about it's kind of putting it on them to keep an eye on them, and they love that, the folks that live there. And so it's been a great program all around, and your staff has been, has done all of that. So appreciate that. And the check is a bonus, right? Passed all that to me anyways.
Absolutely. So the pandemic wasn't the only thing that we were talking about in 2020 and engaging residents and businesses on. One story that was a particularly negative story that we handled with a lot of grace, and I specifically want to compliment Chief Anima about how he handled the hit and run incident that happened at the very end of 2019, but then the story spilled all into 2020. It's unusual for me anyway in my career to get many phone calls from the New York Times, but that morning in February, I was. And we had a choice to make, I think, as a community about what we wanted to signal about a tragic event like this and our intention to move forward and to partner with that family and with our law enforcement to make sure that justice was done. I think that we hit those marks. The picture there of the firefighters standing in solidarity with the community and making a strong statement, rejecting hate and the motives behind that incident, that's a wonderful photo. Similarly, this summer, when there was quite a bit of civil unrest throughout the country, Clive was challenged again on multiple fronts to make some very clear statements about where we stand as a community and as a city when it comes to equity, inclusion, justice, and also strong stance against racism and other forms of discrimination. And I'm proud of the steps that we've taken on that. The page that we've created, that I've worked very hard with the police department on, and Lieutenant Rayberg as well, he's put a ton of time into this, where we've talked about our commitment to fairness and accountability in being keepers of the peace and making sure that people understood our policies. In other communities here in the metro right now, I haven't seen this level of transparency around these policies and around some of the other steps that the departments very likely may have already taken in response to some change in community expectations with the way law enforcement works with them. Clive, at least here in the Des Moines Metro, I feel like has done a nice job positioning ourselves to be transparent and to be accurate and to be responsive on this very important issue. So that's why I included this infographic that we prepared not only to use on our social media page, but to have as sort of a permanent fixture on our fairness and accountability page. Public safety in general was a big theme throughout the year. Over here, we've got our Detective Coleman, who was featured in a wonderful video we put together to recruit law enforcement officers. That was a great success. We ended up with wonderful class. We have excellent officers who are coming on board, and we had a diverse and large applicant pool. The chief and his entire team did a wonderful job, just person to person, going out and talking to folks who might be interested in these careers. We were able to complement that person to person work, though, with some great digital assets. And this video is something not only will we be able to use for sort of current recruiting processes, but it's got an evergreen quality. We'll be able to keep doing it. The public safety building, groundbreaking. This one, I hope Matt and all of you look at it with a big smile on your face, because I know it was a long time coming to arrive at that location and then arrive at the design and then arrive at the day when we were actually breaking ground. That was a nice success, and the page that we've created for the project features these types of this video, as well as some of the other video updates that DCI group has been putting together, and I think they've been very popular. We've talked about the census. Down here, we're talking about 86th Street neighborhoods. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit as a project going forward. Call out to our parks partners here. They've done a great job throughout the season, throughout the year, both library and parks and recreation, using some of these video assets and using the technology at hand to pivot when we couldn't convene everybody in person because of the ongoing pandemic. For Councilman McCoy, I included the cart swap picture up here, because not only are the new carts very nice, but his team was a great partner to us in the city, getting through a logistically very challenging project. The great move at the end to deploy a texting service so that people could immediately kind of find out what the status was of their swap ended up being a really decisive move that helped us get through a sticky situation. Clark Street, probably the single biggest street reconstruction project of the year, required a ton of just very, very patient and steady communications. Jim and the Public Works team have done a wonderful job on that. I'm not going to touch on all the other pictures there, but I think they are pretty self-explanatory. Maybe it's just to say here, we have our collection of Zoom videos that we are now using to record these meetings. And I expect that we'll be using that technology extensively moving forward, even once we're all able to move together, to get together in person again. So a compilation of a number of big stories from the year, important stories for us to think about in retrospect, because they, I think, on the balance, were great successes. This slide outlines what we always map to when we think about community engagement: the policy priorities, the management priorities that have been approved by this council. The 5 goals have remained the same for the past 3 years now. We're sort of thinking about our community engagement strategy, and beneath them, then you see a number of items that are sort of sub-projects that align with these primary goals. Excuse me. So let's talk about priority campaigns. Top bullet will be, how are we going to do our part to complement other voices and as we go through the last chapters in the COVID-19 pandemic? The information that'll be coming out about vaccines, encouraging folks to get vaccinated, encouraging folks to continue those good social distancing and mask wearing practices that have kept us healthy and safe in large part so far. Those are going to be absolutely critical messages as we move into the January, February, March timeframe as well. I expect that we'll be talking about many of these things, though, well into the third quarter of 2021. I don't know the shape of all of those messages. We'll be listening for them, and we hope that they will be clear so that we don't end up with some of the more confusing repeating some of the more confusing moments that we had in 2021. Excuse me, in 2020. That said, it is an evolving situation. It's a new situation. So gray and a certain degree of uncertainty is going to be a big part of this. Helping the community stay in that good mindset, positive about being able to get through this, confident that if we all stand together and we do our part by each other, that we could stay safe and healthy. We're going to stay on that front and keep focused on the persuasion. Any questions specifically about where we're heading with COVID communications? Okay. I'm going to bounce through these quickly because you're familiar with these projects. Some, although I want to call out because they're right in front of us now. So 86th Street Neighborhood Plan, Lenan Park improvements, that's ongoing. If you haven't visited createclive.com yet, I certainly encourage you to do that. This, as well as the Water Resources Master Plan, will be steady community engagement and communications throughout all of 2021. The MetroNet deployment is something we've been talking about quite a bit the last 2 months. All of you should know that it is here now in Urbandale, that they've already started putting out some of those lawn darts in residential neighborhoods because they're that close to going ahead and starting to bore fiber and conduit into those residential spaces. We don't expect anything here in 2020 this month with MetroNet. They are still in the process of submitting materials to the city, but we do expect, based on the communications we've had with them over the past couple of weeks, that we will be getting started on some of the major corridors in Clyde as early as January and February, weather permitting, which means that we'll be getting into our residential neighborhoods very early in 2021, and we need to make sure that we give residents plenty of information about what they should expect so that we can not only help them answer questions, but then also be their advocate if they end up in a spot where things aren't going right with MetroNet. The Public Safety Center continues to go up. We're looking forward to seeing the precast go up here in a matter of weeks, potentially. K-9 unit fundraising, that's something that is off to a great start. We've already raised a third of what's necessary to get that $60,000 to start the program. It's been good working with the police department on that, and we've seen a very positive response from the community, both residents and businesses. Tree removal, that's another one that's right in front of us. Richard has built a good communication plan for what we'll be doing in the area from the interstate to about 100th Street around the Greenbelt. But he's also done a nice job speaking with our friends over in Indian Hills Woods so they understand what's going on with the tree removal there potentially as well. The earned media on this and really leveraging all of our communications tools so that we start the story with accurate information and sort of in a framework that aligns with what the city's plan is, that's going to be really important. It's going to help get past some of that initial and reasonable reaction to say, oh gosh, I don't want to see trees going down, to understanding that there's a reason why this is happening and that reason makes sense to me. So we'll be putting extensive time over the next weeks to prepare for that. And we expect that in early January is when we would be shooting to have some good earned media with our television partners and other opinion leaders. Pavement maintenance is always going to be an important story as we go into the snow season. I'm happy that we're ready to start testing our own e-notify email and text service for people who've signed up. I don't have an updated count on the number of people who have signed up, but I will be following that especially as we go into the rest of the snow season and do a little bit of more promoting, pushing people to sign up for that so they know when to get their vehicles off the street. Economic development, communications, and broadly the city's finances and taxes, that's always a steady drumbeat, especially when it comes to finances and taxes and making sure that we are accurate and transparent with the budget process, with lost funds being spent. That's something that is very important to this council and has served us well, and we will continue to tell a number of stories to the community about those topics. Any questions about priority campaigns? Okay. Here are a number of the tactics, strategies that we're going to be using. I already called out the addition of using some text. We'll also be bringing a lot of our email communications into a single platform that will help us better track the way people are engaging with our emails, open rates, click rates. It'll also, I think, create another moment where we can get a little more synergy across the different teams where we're creating a lot of content and identify some areas where we're going to be able to repurpose that content on other platforms that the city manages. That final bullet too about the need to continue being resilient and adapting to the realities created by the pandemic. I can't stress it enough. That's going to be a huge part of our work in 2021.
Hey, Pete, in light of your creating in-house videos, I received a lot of comments that people really enjoyed the videos with your kids on them. I can't remember if that dealt with snow removal or what it was, but people really thought those were cute and very effective.
They are great cheap labor for the city. We don't even need to report them on the audit. They're happy to do it.
So the message there is more your kids and less of you, I guess. So if I had to-
Yeah, I got the message loud and clear, Councilman. Thank you. They enjoy it. And to what Councilman McCoy said too, in just about anything that deals with the greenbelt and the goats or being down in the water or being in the creek, that is our hook as a city. When we need to think about ways to inspire people to take action or to build their knowledge base, when we can bring things back to that civic heart of the community, the greenbelt, we end up having great success. So the last slide is about some of the engagement challenges. Top one, of course, is just uncertainty about where we're heading with the pandemic and what kind of response we might see with vaccinations becoming available. The stress that's been caused by the pandemic and the disruption it's caused in some of the economic activities, that's something that we know is going to be with us for some time still. COVID fatigue in general among residents, people sticking with it, doing the simple things to stay healthy and safe. Keeping everybody positive is going to continue to be a real challenge. And one audience in particular that I'm particularly concerned about are our healthcare providers. We have a number of healthcare providers who are residents in Clive. We have a number of healthcare providers who have facilities in Clive or right there on our border as well. They are the very front of the line when it comes to getting through this right now. And when they speak and ask our community to do what we can to take care of them the way that they've taken care of us, we need to sit and listen and make sure that we are doing our part as well. One particularly powerful message we were able to share earlier this month was a video that a number of leading healthcare networks in the country put together where they showed just that fatigue that our healthcare providers are feeling right now. DSM Magazine also back in September wrote a specific piece about how a number of Des Moines healthcare providers are feeling in all of this right now. For me, that's been a really powerful message. When I'm feeling frustrated by the pandemic, to sit and think about what they're feeling right now and what they're experiencing and how they're trying to deal with this gracefully reminds me frequently just that, yeah, we can do our part to help take care of them because they're working like hell to take care of us. One bullet here that I don't want to index on too much, but it's one that I am always watching carefully is how connected do people in Clive feel to their community? How important do they feel like it is to be connected to their community? This question from the resident survey back in March isn't actually asking how they feel, whether they feel that's important. It's asking them, do they feel it's important relative to other major priorities as well, like public safety? So there are some that you would expect always to get that very important mark, when that public safety always is at the top of the list there. What I wanted to point out here, though, is the trend. Overwhelmingly, people feel very connected in Clive. They feel like they enjoy the identity of being a Clive resident. But the relative importance compared to other priorities that they put on that connection and engagement with their community has been declining steadily since we first started asking this question back in 2014. That's just the number here at 69% is lower than the benchmark that we saw among other communities. And this is one of those questions where we get compared to hundreds of other communities as well. I don't think it's a red flag right now, but it is one that we should continue to watch. I also don't think Clive is unique in this situation. I think that this overall sense of community cohesion and some sort of people committed to the norms of civil society, it's being challenged right now. We're seeing some fraying of those norms right now. And reminding everybody of the importance of being a good neighbor, the importance of being kind, the importance of looking out for each other. Some of those messages that the mayor features frequently in his newsletter stories and has throughout 2020, and I'm sure will continue to as well, those matter. I think that values-rich language is something that our audiences are responding to, and I would encourage all of you to not shy away from using that kind of language, because the strength of our community really does in many ways come down to how well we work together, how much we care for each other and look out for each other as well. The last one I want to call out is audiences that we haven't historically been engaging. Most of our communications for the city of Clive are in English. We're prioritizing communications with people who are native English speakers, more or less, or English speakers, and people who are literate. There are many people who are not literate in English, although they may be literate in another language and aren't people who have fluent English. What is our responsibility to be engaging with those populations? What can we be doing better? So some things we've done to improve in that space, one would be we have the translation tools now that are on the City of Clive website. We also have a number of tools that are built into the site that help people who have different abilities engage with the content, whether they may be visually impaired, audio impaired, maybe there are people who have need that high resolution contrast or a larger print to be able to engage with that content. I think our website does a good job meeting the needs of people of all abilities now, certainly better than it did before. The language translation too, we could do it on the website, but we really, I think, need to challenge ourselves to do that in our written communication and find partners who can help us do that in our videos and other ways that we want to communicate too. Great shout out to the community development team. Then when they built createclive.com, they said, we want to make sure that we have a way for folks to quickly see where they're supposed to go if they want to read about this project in a different language. And we worked with our friends at the West Des Moines schools who did a great job helping us think about the language we needed to get, and then they did a nice job working with local businesses to get the appropriate translations. We need to keep working on that as we move forward. Last, and this is an ongoing challenge, would be just when we're working on projects that get into the wonkiness of being a city, and we need to get interest built among residents and kind of build up their knowledge base so that they can really get into some of these projects. The Water Resources Master Plan is a great example of that. Everybody, I think, knows that they pay a storm sewer utility bill if they're a property owner in Clive, but they may not understand everything that goes into that. They may not even know, and why would they, what an MS4 permit is and why it's important. We've got a lot of teaching to do in those spaces, and our willingness to sort of stick with it and endure and be patient is going to be critical so that we can get the resident engagement we need to get a great outcome from a lot of these types of planning processes. And Mayor, that is the end of my presentation. Happy to answer questions.
You did a great presentation. Certainly the poster for everything that we stand for, and it's great to have it in this document. A relatively short document too, something I'd like to keep handy for myself. Council questions for Pete?
Well, I'd just like to speak up and say this has been a great synopsis of things that have happened, and it really has been important this year, above all years, to be able to do the storytelling that you've helped us to do. And this is a really good reminder of that. So thank you.
Other comments or questions, Council?
I wanted to echo, Mayor, if I could, I wanted to echo Susan's comments. Really, our communication efforts, Pete, with you leading the helm, have really come a long way. I really appreciate everything you've done and utilizing the latest technology. I think we're doing a great job of continuing to tell our story in these very trying times.
Okay, Pete, fantastic. We'll look forward to continuing to live these things out and improve upon them and tweak on them as we move forward. So great job putting that together for us. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to reports now. And Pete, being that you were just on, I'm going to start at your end of the dais.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing more to share this evening. We've already talked about some of the big stories that we'll be telling in the next month, 2 months.
Pete, thank you. Ted, you've been remarkably quiet tonight. I figured now is your time.
One moment, Mayor. I've got to make sure I can get Ted unmuted here.
You got to wake up, Ted, or what'd you say? I couldn't hear you.
One moment. Councilman, you should be able to hit *6.
All right, can you hear me?
There we go.
All right. Yeah, I've had all kinds of muting and unmuting issues tonight. That's a big reason for my silence. In any event, the only thing I have tonight is I did attend the Greater Des Moines Partnership Legislative Priorities meeting this morning. I believe both Susan and Matt were on it as well. I'm not sure if anyone else was on it. It was an interesting meeting. They talked about potential increase in sales tax, the reform of criminal justice, and broadband expansion were three of the big topics. Found it interesting that there were 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans on, and that were at least the main speakers, and it was pretty clear throughout the meeting that they were definitely on different sides of these issues. They were pretty general, not a lot of specifics, but it was pretty clear there was some space between them, and it did get a little testy there at the end, which was kind of interesting. So should make for an interesting session coming up. It sounds like it's going to be, unfortunately, pretty partisan. So I don't know if Matt or Susan has other comments on that, but that's all I have tonight, Mayor.
Thanks, Ted. Matt or Susan, comments on that?
I was interested, especially in the discussion about broadband. They talked through the legislative priorities that were under consideration, and that was definitely one where I thought there was real agreement, but not an identification of what their path forward will be.
Okay, Ted, thank you. And Susan, thank you. We're going to move to Eric now, I think.
A couple things, Mayor. I attended a Create Clive community session. The organization continues to move forward, giving good feedback on the 86th Street neighborhood, and good community feedback there, specifically with some ideas on Lenan and overall general thoughts on how we can renovate and continue to reinvest in the 86th Street neighborhood. Also took a tour of the Dallas County Jail with Sheriff Leonard right there. They begin moving offenders in on this Monday or last Monday. Interesting enough that facility took almost 4 years to get where they are right now. And what I came away with is the value of having an owner's rep that really helps to define and monitor the progress of the project. There's real value in having that expert right there. Sheriff Leonard was essentially overseeing the whole project, and like he said, he's a sheriff. He's not a construction supervisor. So kudos to Sheriff Leonard for helping to get that thing moving and that bond passed and getting that put up. But it was it's been a challenge. A couple other quick things. Wanted to congratulate Lieutenant Rayberg on the CARES grant, and Richard, want to congratulate you on the REAP grant. $125,000 is pretty extensive grant right there. So congratulations. It's that type of out of the box thinking and effort that I think going after those dollars that gives the people of Clive a great investment right there. And that's all, Mr. Mayor.
Eric, thank you. And a great point about Dallas County Jail. How many times did that go to ballot? Did it go 3 times?
3 or 4, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. And, so your point just illustrates, I think, perfectly what we've been able to bring into our plan early on with our public safety center. So thank you for bringing that up. Great stuff. Thank you, Eric. Let's see, John.
Nothing tonight.
John, thank you. So it's been a fun week. We started out Sunday night at about 40 degrees with the mayor's tree lighting virtually. That seemed to go pretty well. And but my appreciation to all the staff that brought that together and to our chamber friends. Really just trying to work through some circumstances to honor our memorable traditions. I think is pretty important to do, and I think a job well done to all of those. help make that happen. So appreciate that. We had personnel committee meeting this week with John as chair, and of course Ted, and a lot of things covered. I think we're preparing ourselves to move into a great year personnel wise. And then we had MAC as well, of which Pro Tem Edwards is chair of, and spent a lot of time talking about legislative priorities there as well. Some of the things that Ted mentioned, but a lot of things that are there, definitely a full agenda for the year, and it should be an interesting year at that. One thing we talked quite a bit about was redistricting and reapportionment, and that whole process, which is fairly extensive. Tom Cope did a great job, I think, outlining that process, and it's just good for all of us, I think, to be aware of what's coming. I mean, we're proud of our census participation. Well, this will be part of that outcome. So great things there. Before I move on, I want to be remiss because I don't want to forget to do this. This is our last meeting for the year, and as a group, and I'm proud to serve with this group. And I wish everybody the merriest of Christmases, happy holidays, and New Year. I'm sure we'll see each other and communicate in the meantime, but we won't be meeting together until next year. So my best to all of you and your families, and thank you for all that you do. The dedication is incredible across the board with everyone in this room. So I'll stop there, just to say thank you. Susan, you're next.
Okay, Your Honor. Our Bravo board met last week, and it won't surprise you, since you recently had a chance to hear from Director Sally Dix, that there's been a real focus on the challenging budget, but really a focus on trying to do as much as possible to help to continue to support our cultural community in whatever ways we can. There's a recognition that there will be an additional slight loss to the budget because of the inability to do an in-person event for the gala, and they've opted not to do a virtual event either, but to focus on trying to do some fundraising to make up that gap. So this may be a year where we can learn from that process, and we may see some differences moving forward on how that will all work. I sit on the environmental committee of the Central Iowa Water Trails. We'll be meeting next week. And I did also want to mention, related to Bravo, that we elected some new people to the board, and there was a real focus on trying to increase diversity of representation on the board, which was good to see. So that's it.
Susan, quick question on Bravo. I think we've all seen recently that the governor made available, I think it's $9 million in arts, culture, and heritage funding from the state, and I'm wondering how that fits in with Bravo, or if it does.
It does. Bravo considered looking at applying for some of those funds, but realized that since we're down to 2 staff people, and it has to be a part of administering a program, that what we already are doing wouldn't count. It would have to be something new to support the arts and culture community. But a pretty sizable amount has come into what is basically the Des Moines Arts Festival group, and they're going to be doing a lot to support local artists.
Well, good. Okay. Thank you very much. Michael.
I have nothing tonight.
Thank you, Michael. Madam Council, anything from you?
I just want to share a thank you to the council for engaging the firm and me to continue to serve. It's an honor and a privilege. Thank you. Have a good new year.
Thank you, Christina. Always a pleasure. Matt,
Thank you, Your Honor. As we head into the new year, happy holidays to everybody, since this is our last meeting of the year. The January meetings, per usual, will be jumping into the proposed budget for the next year, and starting off in a kind of our similar rotation with the Public Works and the utility funds and road use in the first meeting on the 14th, and then the general fund and trust and agency budgets on the 28th. So likely in this, obviously in this virtual format, but we will have that presentation for you and for your consideration. Related to that, so in terms of just kind of the city's financial position, we are still in a very solid position. We recently received over $400,000 from the state of Iowa as a part of the CARES Act funding for reimbursement for COVID expenses related to public safety. And so that is now in our general fund. And we did receive word here recently. We had some concerns, the council will recall, when we were first into this pandemic, what would be the impact for things like local option sales tax. At this point in time, we thought there might be some kind of reconciliation in November is usually when it happens, where we start to see that there was a sales tax decline in the spring, that the state trues it up in November for the previous fiscal year. We did not see a negative number. We actually saw the reconciliation number go up. So collections actually were higher than what was estimated. So that was not something we were expecting. I don't think Joyce and I, either one of us, expected that. We were, of course, always planning for the worst. So with that, we still, as you'll hear as we get into January, particularly in the your next meeting, we'll talk a little bit about where road use still has a little bit of lagging that's happening, but is starting to fully come back. And then obviously hotel motel, as Councilmember Judkins referred to, is still a challenge in terms of the majority of the funding going to Bravo and Catch Des Moines, but a portion that also funds certain elements of city operations. Still will have some revenue challenges as we head into 2021 until travel and activity fully comes back following the pandemic. So with all that said, one thing I wanted to bring up to this council that I've been thinking about over the last couple of weeks and been sitting in some meetings, hearing a lot about needs related to housing and food assistance, particularly housing assistance. Polk County allocated a large chunk of funds back in the fall that was provided to the Polk County Housing Trust, and they had been using those funds to prevent evictions, going to eviction court, negotiating with the tenants and our landlords, and working out ways to keep people in their homes that were struggling financially from the economic impacts of the pandemic or for other reasons, potentially health as well. They're coming up on the end of the year where the federal moratorium on evictions is going to be is set to expire. No idea whether that's going to be extended or not. They also received some private grants. I think an anonymous donation of $100,000 that Polk County Housing Trust had received, and that money is getting close to running out. And so I was hearing about this, and I reached out to Eric Burmeister, Polk County Housing Trust, because I haven't really seen any data specific to Clive, and asked him, based on zip codes, can you give me kind of an understanding of what some of the challenges that are issues that they've served through those funds, specifically for Clive residents that live in Polk County. And he provided some information to me that from a time period of about September 1st to December 1st, they utilized about $16,000 to help 14 adults and 7 children in Clive remain in their homes. And so one thing, I also reached out to Supervisor Brownell and kind of wanted to get an indication of where the county is at as we head into 2021. And they're obviously very focused on this issue. And one thing I wanted to ask the council and get some feedback and potential direction on is obviously back in the spring when we had some business shutdowns as related to the governor orders, we did a small business grant program in collaboration and leveraged resources from the county and from the Greater Des Moines Partnership to execute about $25,000 worth of grants of our funding back, which was leveraged with others back to the community. And so with housing and food assistance, in terms of also hearing of the hunger needs, food needs in the community and the broader metro area, wanted to get a feeling from the council of is there something that we should be looking at from the city of Clive perspective, potentially in a leveraging position with other resources as we head into 2021, especially now where we're starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel, as Pete alluded to in his presentation. Really, it's about getting through this winter, right? Is at least what we're hearing at this point. And is there some resources that we should be considering, potentially a piece of the $400,000 that we received here recently from the state to put towards housing and food assistance for Clive residents. And so wanted to put that out there for consideration. It could, similar to what we did with the business grant program, not proposing to reinvent the wheel here by any means. I think working with partners has been very effective for us, just like we did with the partnership program and working with the Iowa Center for Economic Success in terms of evaluating the grant applications for small businesses and executing that for us. I think there's a potential partner here, obviously with the Polk County Housing Trust, that is already doing these activities. Is there something that we do, whether it's some grant funding or maybe a line of credit, where if the Polk County Housing Trust identifies that there are running out of resources and they're aware of Clive residents that are in need of resources to remain in their home during these winter months, is there something that we could do? And so that's something I wanted to ask you all about here at the end of the meeting, get your thoughts and reactions to that, and potentially if you're interested in it. Obviously, under the code, you've given me some spending authorization up to a certain amount that if I could work with the Polk County Housing Trust and others to maybe put something together as knowing that we don't have a meeting between now until January 14th to make sure there isn't a gap there potentially between the end of the year and the middle of January. So I will stop talking now and get some thoughts, reactions, comments from all of you.
Council questions, comments from Matt. I think I would probably have some, but I'll defer to you all first.
Well, I think the last thing we want is to have any Clive residents evicted in the middle of winter. So to the extent that we can develop a plan and give Matt authorization to be able to fill the gap if it occurs, I think is a good idea, whether it's provide some seed money initially, or as Matt referred to, if they run out of money, then he'd be authorized to fill the gap for the Clive residents. I think with his relationship with Eric Burmeister, I'm sure he'd be able to pick up the phone and find that out. So I'm supportive of that up to that $25,000 limit.
I would concur on that. I also agree that we need to look for other ways to leverage resources as well. But you hate to see anybody in a tough winter, especially, Clive residents, so cold, but I would concur.
I would offer that what we have been doing the last, I think, several years in partnership with Polk County and mainly through Supervisor Brownell has been to partner with them and leverage. They actually matched our $8,000 contribution to Clive Community Services, our food pantry. And they've done that with us, and that's been, I think, a great example of a leverage and an opportunity with a relationship to do more by coming together, which is, I think, is always a good idea. As we talk about the current pandemic situation, and I would say, let me go back real quickly, that we were doing that in a pre-pandemic environment. So I would suggest or would imagine that the need is even greater now from a food insecurity perspective than it ever was. So I think as we consider how we might be helpful going forward to a higher level, in an incremental way to what we're already doing, that we consider the food insecurity situation, but that we certainly try to partner with Polk County at the very least Matt and I have a Zoom call with Bob coming up next week, and it was mainly focused on Clyde Community Services, but I think that if we could do something on the housing side as well, it hit both of those really key areas that I think all of us are sensitive to for Clive residents. I think it would be a great thing for us to do. So anyway, I'll stop there. I think that there's some concurrence here. Are there other thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Mayor, and it would be, I think we should ask Bob if he's willing to match, even if it's the first 5,000 or the 2,000 or 8,000 or whatever, right? As they have that money, that community money, that just ask him. All I can say is no. The only other thing on this one, and briefly had said something, is I just don't want to limit it to renters, right? You know, I think we need to be open to anybody that is having housing issues, whether it be mortgages. You know, I mean, we may have some folks out there that are 3 months, 4 months back on their mortgage, and let alone, you know, with their landlord. And to me, a landlord is the same as a bank. And so just be open to that. That we don't just, I keep hearing a renters program. I understand why, and I understand it, but for us as Clive to be open to anybody that is having difficulty.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. I'm glad you made that point, Michael, because as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about that as well. I guess just didn't articulate it, but I think that's a really important point, because there are a lot of people across the spectrum that could be running into real housing issues as this continues. So thank you for that.
What I would offer, Your Honor, too, is that's definitely, I would, 100% occur with Councilmember McCoy, and that's something that I can engage with Eric and the Polk County Housing Trust, as well as the Dallas County Housing Trust as well, and what they do on that side, and to see what we could do as a part of this, for homeowners as well that may be struggling in that financial stress situation. So I think that is definitely something we can pursue as a part of this.
Matt, does that give you enough guidance?
Yes, it does. I will proceed forward and work on that under my authorization at this point, and then we'll talk more kind of where we're at throughout the process, and then again in January.
Yeah, we'll look forward to your updates on that. Matt, anything else for the good of the order?
That's all I had, Your Honor.
Council, any other questions for Matt at this point?
I had one quick question, and just to give Matt, if you give me a kind of a high-level overview on your authorizations. You did approve about $35,000 in change orders for the public safety facility. Just kind of quick run me through those. I saw something on Proslove, something of that nature. Just, I don't want to beleaguer this. Just real quick on that.
Sure. Yeah. So the authorization that I have under the code is for $25,000 per item, and that's related to change orders and expenditures. And the change orders that we had related to the public safety facility, one was related to an adjustment that was made. The largest change order, the $24,000 one, was related to a change, and we talked about this. The facility committee really went through it with the architect and the owner's rep and the construction manager, is we were wrestling with a better strategy for winter conditions. We were a little frustrated that maybe initially the building could have been, we knew that the building was going to be operated under winter conditions in terms of putting up steel and precast. And so the architect knew that. And yet there were some things that we could have done then that would have been included in the normal bids that we're deciding to do now. And basically that is frost footings in the interior of the building. Usually you don't do that because by the time the building is enclosed and built, you don't have concerns about heaving in the middle of the building because it's been heated and already built. But when you're doing it in winter conditions, there is no guarantees that that's going to be the case. And so you may have to heat it with blankets and other things that would be costs that we basically would throw away. And so the design change that was recommended there and approved was to put frost footings in the interior of the building. In the long run, it's its value that stays in the building and is not thrown away. And it was a decision that was made that I think will be a good long-term investment for us. So that was the largest one. The other one that was done here recently, our public works staff had requested, after we were getting to the point of installing the water main and looking at things, is they requested a better kind of valving structure for the building, knowing that the run between one end of the building over to where the water main connects south of the church was a pretty long run. They preferred to have more isolation valves throughout that system, so we could maybe take, if we had to separate just the public safety building, we could do that without impacting any of our neighbors for whatever reason, in terms of water main maintenance or a valve issue or a pipe issue. And so that was something that they requested that we didn't catch in the design review early on, that they had requested as a part of the building permit process. So that was a kind of a city ad, if you will, that we wanted to see. So those were the other one, the other smaller one, this is one that we're actually looking to get a credit on back to us. This was a small design flaw in terms of the size of where the width of the foundation walls that the precast panels sit on. This is something that the structural engineer it should have caught. It's pretty typical, and we're pursuing a credit on that change order with the designers. So we should be getting that. We'll be getting that back.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, council, or comments? Good discussion. Well, then I would say, is there anything else for the good of the order? Hearing none, I'm going to adjourn us at 8:21 p.m. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Happy holidays.
And,